Salams and welcome to another fabulous episode of this book, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, His Life Based on the Earlier Sources by Martin Lings. And we are busy with episode number 227 in chapter 69, which is Khaybar. So I don't know if you can see that, chapter 69, Khaybar. Right, so we read in the previous episode where after the conquest of Khaybar, a Jewess came to celebrate with the Prophet ﷺ. She made a roasted lamb, but she infused it heavily with poison, and especially on the shoulder joint, because she found out from other people that the Prophet ﷺ really loved a shoulder joint of a lamb, and in this she put heavy duty overdose of poison, and Nabi ﷺ invited the Sahabi to join him, and one of them, Bishr, his name is, he took a bite and he had already swallowed it. But by the time Nabi ﷺ put the piece of lamb in his mouth, the roasted lamb, told him, Ya Nabi, I am poisoned. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam immediately spat it out, and he told the other Sahabi, stop, don't eat this. The lamb has told me that I am poisoned. Then he called the Jewish lady, the Jewess, and he asked her, why did you do this? And she said, I want to determine if you are a king or if you are a prophet. Because if you are a prophet, then the animal would tell you. And in fact, it did turn this way here. Unfortunately, the Sahabi Bishr, he did not survive. It was a very powerful poison, and he succumbed very soon, and probably frothing at the mouth. Immediately his face became ashen. That means his blood pressure dropped tremendously. The poison went throughout his body because he had already swallowed it from his stomach. It went throughout his body, and he did not survive. But nonetheless, through his mercy and generosity, the Prophet ﷺ forgave the woman, and he did not punish her for this crime of assassination, attempted assassination of the Prophet ﷺ, and the death of a Sahabi. So this was treachery, to invite someone to a meal, but it was actually a poisoned meal. So this Jewess was not the only woman who had lost family people. Among the captives taken as a result of Kinana's hiding the treasure was the widow of Kinana, known as Safiya, the daughter of that Huyay. You know, the Huyay, the previous chief who was so instrumental at the Battle of Khandak, who rallied everyone to try and attack Medina. So that was the daughter of Huyay, who had persuaded the Banu Qurayza to break their treaty with the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and who had been put to death penalty because of the treason. And that was at the Battle of the Trench. And Safiya was 17 years old and had only married Kinana a month or two before the Prophet ﷺ set out from Medina. The marriage, while it lasted, was not a happy one. Unlike her father, Huyay, and her husband, Kinana, the two chiefs, Safiya was of a deeply pious nature. From her earliest years, she had heard her people talk of the Prophet who was soon to come in this area of Medina, and this had filled her imagination. And the way they describe that she's a woman of piety and she was filled with longing to meet the Prophet, it reminds me of, like, say, a person like Rabia al-Basri, or some of the awliya, very pious woman who just by nature, doesn't matter what religion they are, you'll see, even in today's time, you'll just look at a woman, whatever, she can be black, white, green, yellow, Chinese, American, Russian, whoever it is, and you'll look at that person and say, what an amazing pious woman there is, and then we make dua that may Allah guide these amazing people to Deen al-Islam, Ameen. So, unlike her father and her husband, Safiya was of a deeply pious nature. From her earliest years, she had heard her people talk of the Prophet who was soon to come, and this had filled her imagination. Then they had spoken of an Arab in Mecca, a man of Quraysh, who claimed to be that very Prophet that she had heard of. And then came the news that he had arrived at Kuba, within Medina, in the outskirts, and she said, wow, this guy is coming nearer and nearer. That was 7 years ago, when she was a child of 10. And she well remembered that her father and her uncle, setting confidently out for Kuba in order to reassure themselves that the man was an impostor. They could not believe it. They said, it must be a Jew. It can't be an Arab, right? But what had imprinted itself on her memory, above all, was their return late at night both in a state of extreme dejection. They were so unhappy. They were shouting and arguing because they thought he was an impostor, but he turned out to be the real prophet and the final prophet from the divine. It was clear from what they had said that they believed the newcomer to be the promised prophet without a shadow of a doubt, but that they intended to oppose him. They said, we don't care, we're going to oppose him because we really thought that he's going to be a Jew. And so her young mind was very troubled and puzzled by the reaction of her father and her uncle to say, if they know that he's a prophet, why are they not following him? Why are they saying that they're going to oppose him? So this, she was in a bit of a quandary, and she could not understand the logic of her parent and her uncle. Soon after her marriage, and not long before the Prophet ﷺ arrived in front of Khaybar, she had a dream. The Safiya had a dream. She saw a brilliant moon hanging in the sky, and she knew that beneath it lay the city of Medina. Then the moon began to move towards Khaybar. Now this moon is Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This is a metaphor for Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So the moon came, it was hanging in the sky, then the moon was in the city of Medina, and the moon started moving to Khaybar. That means Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is now moving to Khaybar, and the moon is going to Khaybar, where it fell into her lap. Subhanallah. When she woke, she told Kinana what she had seen in her sleep, whereupon he struck her, hit her a very hard blow to her face and said, this can only mean that you desire the king of the Hijaz, Muhammad, that you want to marry him. Right? The mark of the blow was still visible on her face when she was brought as a captive to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He asked her what had caused it, who hit you like this so badly on your face? And she told him of this magnificent and amazing dream that she had about the moon going from Medina and coming towards Khaybar, and the moon arriving and landing in her lap. Now, Dihya of the Bani Kalb, who had entered Islam shortly after Badr, had asked that Safiya should be given to him as his share of the booty of Khaybar, or as part of his share, and the Prophet ﷺ had agreed. But upon hearing this magnificent and amazing dream, he sent to Dihya and told him that he must take her cousin instead. He then told Safiya that he was prepared to set her free, and he offered her the choice between remaining a Jewess, as a free Jewess, and returning to her people totally free without being harmed, or she can enter Islam and choose to be his wife. So what a magnificent choice. And the answers that she gave, I choose God and his messenger, and that's how Safiya became part of the al-Mu'mineen, our mother, radiallahu anha, and they were married at the first halt on the march back home to Medina. The campaign was not yet finished, for instead of returning by the direct way they had come, the Prophet ﷺ returned a little to the west and besieged the Jews of the Wadi al-Qura in their fortresses. They had been in league with Khaybar, and after 3 days they surrendered on the same terms and conditions. Ibn al-Aqwa, the Aslamite who had sung to them on the northward march, the camel whisperer, had been killed at Khaybar during the attack upon this strong fortress, the citadel. His own sword had somehow turned against him and given him a mortal wound, and one of the helpers, the Ansar, remarked that he could not be counted as a martyr. And the Prophet ﷺ said, no, don't say that. Whoever says that he's not a martyr has spoken a lie. Verily, right now he passes through the gardens of paradise as freely as a swimmer passes through water. Subhanallah. Another question about martyrdom arose at Wadi al-Qura, where the Prophet ﷺ's black slave Karkara was killed by an arrow, even as he was unsaddling a camel. But the Prophet ﷺ said, he is burning even now in hell beneath a cloak, which he stole at Khaybar, and which has become a cloak of flame. So this was something that the Prophet ﷺ was given news of the unseen, that the slave had actually stolen some items, and for that he is being punished. It was his wont or his habit to warn them continually that the privilege of living with him in his community brought with it a very grave and serious responsibility to shoulder a heavy burden. For God was just and would judge them more severely than those who lived in worst ages when it was more difficult for them to resist evil. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Verily, you are in an age when whosoever omits 1/10 of the law shall be doomed. But there will come an age when whosoever fulfills 1/10 of the law shall be saved." And I think we are living in those days now that it is so hard to hold on to Deen al-Islam that even if you are holding 10% of the Deen, then you are doing well. Subhanallah. That does not mean that we must relax. We must question ourselves as to what have we done wrong as Muslims, where have we failed. And my own personal assessment is that the key to the success of the Muslims is education and knowledge. We need to empower our men and our women, our youth, our boys and our girls to educate ourselves in every field of endeavor, whether it is in neurology, cardiology, accounting, mathematics, science, astronomy. We need to be at the forefront of, when we're seeing the world today, like how recently when we saw in the Middle East with the pages going off and all of this, we need to be at the forefront of technology, at the forefront of AI technology. The whole world is going into AI technology. We need to, as Muslims, we need to be at the forefront of robot technologies. We need to form our own YouTube, our own LinkedIn, our own Pinterest, our own social media, TikToks and Telegram. We need to be at the forefront of technology, and the only way to do that, is through knowledge and education. Knowledge and education, knowledge and education. And I will end again, I will repeat this hadith again of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It is actually making me shake when I'm hearing this. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, "Verily, you are in an age," right? So that in the old days, verily you are in an age where if you leave out even 10% of the law, you will be doomed, right? So that means if you leave out 10%, you will be doomed. But there will come an age in the future that whoever even fulfills 10% of the law will be saved. Look at that. Ya Rab. Stay well, look after yourself. Alhamdulillah.